Afghans have been voting in the presidential elections. It's only the second time in history they've been able to choose their leader directly. The poll is considered a key credibility test for the country. The first results are still some way off, but the day's been overshadowed by Taliban attacks, patchy turnout and allegations of fraud. Our correspondent Ian Pannell reports from Kabul.
An anthem for election day. Rousing patriotic songs urging people to do their duty and vote. But is anyone listening? The streets of Kabul are almost empty today. Fears about security are keeping shops closed and many people at home. But we met one family over a breakfast of warm bread and tea, prepared to head out to the polling station. Ghulam Rabbani says he'll vote for a fair president who can get the country out of its mess. Many others are also ignoring the threats and queuing quietly at polling stations. This is only the second time they've been able to choose their leader, and 15 million have registered to do just that. First, their fingers are dipped in permanent ink to try and stop fraud. And then they must decide who should be president of Afghanistan. They've got many candidates to choose from, but it's the current President Hamid Karzai who's still the favourite to win. The question of voter turnout is absolutely critical to the credibility of this election. Both the government and the international community are keeping a close eye on this process. Now here, fair numbers of people seem to have turned out, but that doesn't appear to be the same elsewhere in the city and in the country. But this is no ordinary election day. This was the scene on the edge of Kabul today. A gun battle with insurgents. They tried to attack a police station, just one of a series of incidents across the country. The Taliban have tried to disrupt this election and intimidate people into staying away. Shamsuddin lives across the road. He and his sons cowered while bullets flew into their living room. An unusual election day for anyone. But undeterred, he still plans to vote. There have been some remarkable changes in this country. Women queuing to vote is still a powerful image. What they want is simple: stability and some progress. But after decades of war, no one expects this election will achieve all that.
Ian Pannell there in Kabul. We're going to cross live now to Afghanistan. We're joined by Caroline Wyatt, who's in Lashkar in Helmand, and our BBC Persian TV correspondent Dawood Karizada, who's in Kabul. Caroline, if I can start with you first. The day started with a number of attacks, didn't they, down in the south? Did that deter people from voting?
At the beginning of the day, I have to say I was very sceptical as to whether many people would be turning up at the polls. We went into Lashkar shortly before 7 o'clock this morning as the polls were opening. Almost the first thing, almost on the dot, a rocket landed not far from the governor's compound. An IED exploded near a convoy that included Western journalists. We went up onto a roof, we heard another explosion, and another, and another, and another across the city, across the town of Lashkar. I had presumed after that the clear message from the Taliban, stay at home, might be one that would intimidate people, but the polling station we went to see was full. It was full of people determined to vote. And when we spoke to, first of all, the men at one polling station, they said, no, the bombings don't scare us. We think it's important. This is our one chance in 5 years to have our say, and we want to have it. We went over to the women's polling station. As Ian said, the sight of women voting, queuing up there to vote, to put their fingers in the ink and being willing to put their fingers in the ink despite the Taliban threat to chop those fingers off if they catch people who have voted, was indeed a powerful one. One of the women voters said to me, life under the Taliban was appalling. We do have genuine hope here now. We do want to vote for both the president and the provincial councillors here. We really do believe we can have a more stable Afghanistan. Perhaps too optimistic, but nonetheless I think the sight of people voting in Helmand today, and the picture very different depending where you were, some of the villages have had problems as well, was one that I think shows the resilience of people here.
Let's take the temperature in Kabul, the capital now. Dawood Karizada, did you get a sense of how people were feeling today? How many people actually went out, voter turnout?
We don't have any kind of numbers for how many people turned out today, but the turnout was very low until lunchtime in Kabul. And but after lunch, there were people queuing in different polling stations, and people really were afraid of the security situation earlier in the day. But apart from the security situation, when I spoke to one or two of the eligible kind of people who had to go and vote, he said that I'm not going to vote because there are not anyone that I can, sort of trust that can bring a kind of better future and better life to me, so that's why he didn't go and vote. But most of the people in the morning, they were afraid of the Taliban threat, and that's why they didn't go. But apart from the Kabul and other parts of the country, in the northern parts, the turnout has been quite well, and a lot of people, women and men, have been queuing in the polling stations to go and vote in the second kind of democracy test for Afghanistan.
And Caroline, where you are down in the south, it's the heart of the ethnic Pashtun region of the country. Were people prepared to say who they voted for?
Everyone we spoke to had voted for Hamid Karzai, the incumbent. Every single one said he is the president we want. He is the man we believe can lead this country to a better, more secure future. But still, despite that kind of optimism we were hearing, people said, of course, life is still very, very difficult. The insurgents make our life difficult. There are bombings, there are makeshift bombs on the streets. But nonetheless, they really did feel it was important to go and vote today. Of course, it may be a very different picture in some of the villages outside Lashkar. We've heard that in Sangin, for example, security was very problematic, but that in other places like Babaji, which was cleared recently of Taliban by Operation Panther's Claw by coalition British forces up here, that the voting went smoothly there. Impossible to say what the turnout was. Very, very difficult because it is so patchy and so sketchy, even in Helmand itself. But the mere fact that some people were prepared to go despite the intimidation, despite the bombs, despite the bullets, does clearly mean something.
Caroline in Lashkar Gah and Dawood in Kabul. Thank you to you both.
It's 7 a.m. in Washington, midday here in London, and 3:30 in the afternoon in Kabul. In half an hour's time, polls will close in that city and across Afghanistan. 15 million Afghans have been eligible to vote in the first direct presidential elections to be organised by the Afghan government itself. The challenges have been huge, not least the threat from the Taliban. Let's get the very latest now from my colleague in Kabul, Lise Doucette. Lise.
Welcome to the Zarguna Girls' School in the centre of Kabul. This is just one of nearly 7,000 polling stations right across this country. As you can see, it's a brilliant sunny day, but just how brilliant has been the day for democracy. Well, when we arrived here at this polling station just after it opened at 7 a.m. local time, there was a steady stream of people, women with the all-enveloping blue burqas, men in traditional shalwar kameez or Western business suits. All of Afghan society who have to vote in the station seem to be turning out. But as you can see now, it's very quiet. The voting became slower throughout the day, and we have reports from other provinces, particularly in the south, where voting has been very slow and very low. A different picture in the north. Voting has been higher there. A lot of the turnout has to do with fears of violence and actual violence on the day. Let's just take a look at all the main developments. We have this report from my colleague Martin Patience.
This is what it takes to hold an election in Afghanistan. Security is tight for a vote that the Taliban have promised to disrupt. 3 attacks have struck Kabul in less than a week. And then this morning came a 4th, when 2 suspected suicide bombers were shot dead in the east of the city. Voters in the capital casting the first ballots, a defiant act in a country where democracy is still taking root. And here's the president, Hamid Karzai, also voting this morning. He's seen as the favourite, but candidate Karzai is facing strong opposition.
It's the second presidential and parliamentary elections in Afghanistan, and I'm sure that inshallah this will be for peace, for progress, and for the well-being of the Afghan people. And I request the Afghan people to come out and vote, so that through their vote Afghanistan can be a more secure, more peaceful and a better country.
2 former ministers, Dr. Abdullah and Dr. Ashraf Ghani, want to be the next man to lead this country. But while the focus may be on the cities, the election is being fought elsewhere. Almost 3/4 of the population of Afghanistan live in the countryside in 30,000 villages scattered across the country. So whoever wins this election is going to pick up most of the votes from places like this, and they're going to have to win the support of these villagers. Taking place amidst the war, this is no ordinary election, and Afghans may face violence when deciding who's to lead a troubled country. Martin Patience, BBC News, Northern Afghanistan.
Well, there's the report from my colleague in the far north. Let's go now to the deep south, to Lashkargah in Helmand province. Caroline Wyatt can join us. Caroline, not long to go before the polling stations goes. How has the day gone?
It's difficult to say because it depends on which town and which village you are in. Exactly as Martin Patience was just saying, most people live in the rural parts. We went into Lashkargah